Hello guys, this is your friend Shinobi Addict 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto inherited Shisui's Sharingan before the Uchiha Massacre? Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. It was October 10th, a day that would be forever engraved into the history of Konoha. October 10th, the day that the Kyuubi no Kitsune escaped from its Jinchuriki host and wreaked havoc all across Konoha. Thousands of lives were lost in the rampage, but their fates would not end that night thanks to the few new lives that were just brought into the world. It had come down to it. The worst case scenario, however they were prepared. After all, it is common knowledge that when dealing with female Jinchuriki that their seal is at its weakest point during childbirth. And that is exactly the case with Uzumaki Kushina. Not only was she pregnant, but she was pregnant with quadruplets. That in itself would be a problem if she wasn't an Uzumaki, but she was, and that is exactly how she survived the Kyuubi escaping its seal just moment after she gave birth to her final child. And with that she drifted into unconsciousness. Village outskirts. Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime Hokage, was just waking up from unconsciousness. The last thing he remembered was sending away the Kyuubi's Bijudama with his most feared just you, the Hiraishin, and it blowing up a majority of the eastern side of the forests surrounding the village walls. After that he warped away the Kyuubi and himself to the outskirts of the village. He remembered retrieving 3 of his 4 children from the hospital room where Kushina gave birth and setting up the altar for the sealing. After that everything went black for Minato. After looking around and noticing that the area was almost completely destroyed, the young Hokage's eyes settled on the collapsed form of Sarutobi Hiruzen. Then his 3 crying children, each bearing an identical seal on their stomachs. Sandaime-sama must have knocked me out and done the sealing himself using the Shiki Fuin that I taught him in case of an emergency. Minato silently thanked Hiruzen for making the sacrifice so that he would be able to take care of his children and watch them grow up. He vowed to himself that he would do anything within his power to prevent his children from living the life that normal Jinchuriki live. Minato would make sure that they were seen as heroes of the leaf and treated like saviors. He picked up his still crying children and flashed to the Hokage Tower to announce to everyone that the Kyuubi was defeated because of his 3 children and deal with the council while Anbu operatives collected the body of Hiruzen Sarutobi. The Yondaime's thoughts of that night would lead him through pain and suffering. Pain and suffering greater than the Kyuubi could ever cause, at the hands of the son that he had not once thought about that fateful night. Time skip 9 years. Uzumaki Namikaze Estate. A young blonde-haired boy could be found in his small room on the 2nd floor. He was sitting on the windowsill, his eyes glued to the private training ground in their backyard. His eyes weren't interested in the training ground itself, however, they were fixated on the 5 figures within it. He moved out of the shadows and onto the rooftop so he could see more clearly and perhaps learn a few things that he could practice on his own later. After all, his parents had refused to teach him anything beyond unlocking his chakra at this point while they still actively taught the boy's younger siblings. The boy's features could now clearly be seen. He had sun-kissed blonde hair in the same style as his father's, including the 2 jaw-length bangs, and cold gray eyes. He stood at a height of 4 feet 2 inches, which was tall for a 9-year-old boy. However, the most distinguishing feature about this boy were small clumps of freckles that adorned his cheekbones. This boy was none other than Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto. The Uzumaki Namikaze compound was huge, to be blunt about it. It was as large as the Hyuga estate which was right next to it, but there were a few major differences. One of them was that the Hyuga estate housed both the main family and the branch family, which equals around 100 people in total, while the Uzumaki Namikaze estate only housed 6 people. It was a large mansion with 5 bedrooms, a guest room, kitchen, 3 bathrooms, and an absolutely huge study office where Minato and Kushina kept all of their jutsu and training methods. The second difference was that the Uzumaki Namikaze compound was comprised mostly of large training grounds, as most of the jutsu they practice were quite destructive. But the estate didn't always look like this. No, this whole renovation with the addition of the training grounds were added at the requests of his siblings so that their training could be more efficient. Really, they were just jealous because someone named Hyuga Hinata said that their estate was bigger while Naruto's siblings were at the Hyuga estate to play. Speaking of the Uzumaki Namikaze siblings, if you concentrate on where young Naruto is staring, you'll find them along with their parents in the distance. Yes, they were quite a distance away, so far that most of the younger Hyugas would have trouble seeing them. Naruto had always been gifted with incredible eyesight. Why? Who knows? It is likely that the leftover Kyuubi chakra that he inherited when he was born from Kushina was concentrated into and melded with his eyes. At the training ground stood the Yondaime Hokage, dressed in his usual attire. Standing next to him was his wife Uzumaki Kushina. She wore a yellow short-sleeved battle kimono that stopped at her mid-thighs with spandex shorts underneath, black tights that reached above her knees, and dark blue shinobi sandals. Before them were three of their children trying but failing miserably at tree climbing because of their terrible chakra control due to possessing the Kyuubi's yin, yang, and leftover chakra respectively. There was one thing in common with all three of Uzumaki Namikaze's siblings in the training ground. All three of them looked about 3 years younger than their older brother Naruto, even though they were only a few minutes apart. The reason why they looked so much younger than their brother was because of the demonic chakra sealed within them. It took a while for the Kyuubi's chakra to adjust to their own chakra networks and even longer for bodies to adjust to the amount of power, close to 3 years. The one climbing in the tree farthest to the left was a young girl who stood at about 3 feet 5 inches. She had silky red hair just like her mother's that went down to her mid-back and deep violet eyes. She was extremely beautiful for a girl that looked only 6 years old. She held the Kyuubi's yin chakra. This is Uzumaki Namikaze Nitsuki. The one climbing the tree in the middle was Uzumaki Namikaze Nawaki, who stood at 3 feet 4 inches. He had short spiky blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and 3 whisker marks on each cheek. He wasn't trying as hard as the other girls and seemed to not really care about the training. He was a bit on the chubby side and could be easily be mistaken for an Akamichi. He held the Kyuubi's yang chakra. On the far right was Uzumaki Namikaze Narumi, who had made it farther up the tree than the other two because she had less of the Kyuubi's chakra. She stood at 3 feet 5 inches and had long blonde hair that was tied into pigtails to give her a cute schoolgirl look. Her sapphire blue eyes stared at her parents arrogantly as she had made it 15 feet up the tree because of her slightly better control while her two siblings had only made it up 7. She too had 3 whisker marks on each cheek. She held the leftover Kyuubi that was saturating the atmosphere from the large amount of demonic chakra that was used by the Kyuubi 9 years ago. Naruto had seen enough. He climbed down from his position on the roof back into his bedroom after watching his mother and father smother and congratulate their children for making it so far up, and making so much progress after a week of continuously practicing tree climbing. What a joke. They do the smallest little thing and receive more love and affection than I have my entire life from them. He grabbed his pouch filled with kunai and shuriken off of his dresser and left his barren room that had nothing more than the essentials within its confines. He briefly toyed with the idea of telling his parents that he was going to a secluded training ground near the outskirts of the village to do his own training, but opted against it after he recalled the last time he wanted to start his shinobi training. Flashback 6 months ago. Naruto had just woken up to the sounds of his parents walking around the house getting ready for the day ahead of them. He could hear his mother in the kitchen getting breakfast ready and his father was getting his siblings up to start their day. Naruto could hear Natsuki's voice asking what they would be doing for training today. His expression reflexively turned into a scowl and his mind began to wander as he lay in bed, already forgotten. Training. They refused to help me at all or even let me train since we unlocked our chakra 6 months ago. Naruto started to remember the reasons his parents told him why they would need to focus on his siblings. He understood that, but they haven't been doing anything besides chakra control for the past 6 months. Naruto was far from ignorant. He was smart for his age, Some would even go so far as to call him a prodigy, so he could easily see the gap that their training was putting between him and his family. And he didn't want that. Our young prodigy hadn't just been laying around all day while the rest of his family trained, he was training too. He noticed early on that after breakfast his mother and father would take his siblings to one of the farther away training grounds to train. They would spend all of their time there until lunchtime came around and they came back, with the exception of his father who made his way to the Hokage Tower for his duties sometime before then. Naruto would use this window of time to head into his father's study and find a chakra control exercise to train on until his family came back to the house. He had already mastered leaf concentration, leaf spinning, and kunai balancing. He had found out that even with his naturally large reserves, being an Uzumaki, he had naturally good chakra control, which made the exercises that much easier for him. He had also already learned how to perform what most people called the Academy 3 jutsus. Those particular jutsus being the henge, kawarimi, and bunshin. He found them by accident when looking around in the study and decided to give them a try. He had learned them relatively easily. It only took him a few days to get a good grasp on them and had mastered them a few days after that. If that was all the academy requires to graduate, then he wasn't going to be looking forward to his time in the academy. Our young blonde made a silent vow, one more time. I'll ask for training just one more time, and if they refuse I'll start training even harder on my own. With those thoughts in mind, Naruto got out of bed and started heading downstairs. He saw both of his parents in the kitchen and decided to ask them after breakfast. It was a silent breakfast of pancakes, eggs, and orange juice. He sat at the end of the table, his siblings barely awake sat to his left. Minato sat at the head of the table, reading the paper to catch up on the daily events. Kushina had already gotten up to do the dishes before training. Naruto decided now to make his request. To-san, Ka-san, he asked in a shy voice. Both of them looked towards the voice, wondering when he had arrived at the table. Minato glanced up from the newspaper and gave Naruto a curious look before returning back to his paper. What is it, Naruto? We were about to head off to start Naoki's, Narumi's, and Natsuki's training. Kushina was staring intently at Naruto now, knowing what he was going to ask. It's about that actually. I was wondering if you could start training me to be a shinobi too, just like them. Naruto ended hopefully. His siblings were paying close attention to the interaction going on between their parents and their older brother. Minato and Kushina both gave him a frustrated sigh, knowing he wouldn't like the answer. It was Minato who responded, Naruto, you know exactly why we have to train them early. If we don't, they could lose control of themselves and hurt a lot of their classmates once all of you start going to the academy. Besides, we promised you we would only teach you the basics, and we did by helping you unlock your chakra a few weeks ago. The rest you will learn at the academy. Naruto started to get upset at those last few sentences, but the last time you helped me was 6 months ago. I know you have to help them because of the Kyuubi chakra, but all clan children start learning before they go to the academy. Minato was also starting to get a little worked up, but before he could get a word in, Kushina decided to interject herself into the argument, no buts. Kushina replied heatedly, you'll learn chakra control, basic jutsu, and taijutsu at the academy. Naruto was about to respond, but he was cut off. You will listen to your father. He is the Hokage, he knows what's best for you, and he said no, and that's final. Now go to your room and think about what we've said. Kushina yelled, her temper getting the best of her. Naruto didn't say another word, he just did what his mother asked and headed up the stairs to his room. His siblings looked on at the scene with either a confused or a sad look on their face. Don't misunderstand, Kushina and Minato didn't hate Naruto, but they had seen much during their careers as shinobi and had committed unspeakable acts as well. They wanted to have at least one child spared from that fate. Or at the very least, they wanted to let one of their children to enjoy their childhood instead of forcing them to train every day. unknown to them through these beliefs that had already started to push him away from their perfect little family, and it would eventually come back to haunt them. Flashback end. Naruto walked down the stairs and saw that his family had finished their training and were getting ready for lunch in the kitchen. He sighed, hoping they wouldn't ask where he was going. He walked through the kitchen with them, ignoring his very presence. His brother and sisters were dead tired, their form completely slumped over the kitchen table. His mother was the only other one in the room. She was facing the counter, preparing some sandwiches for his siblings after their long day of training. He took this as the perfect opportunity to take his leave. He rushed to the front door. "Mom, I'm going over to Hannah's." And with that he left. Kushina looked up surprised. "What? Who was that? I could have sworn I heard someone's voice just now." She looked over confused to see 3 of her children resting their tired forms on the kitchen table. "I feel like I'm forgetting something. Or maybe someone." She decided to dismiss that thought for now and went back to preparing lunch. Naruto stood in a secluded clearing not too far away from the Uchiha compound. He liked this place because it was quite the distance away from the other compounds, the park, and the heart of the village. Really, it was quite a ways away from everything, so it was unlikely that anyone from his family would catch him training, let alone anyone in general. This was one of his more favored areas to train in. From what I saw, Ka-san used her chakra to walk up a tree. This is probably the tree walking exercise I read about in Toussaint's study. From what I could gather, I need to figure out the necessary amount of chakra required. Too much chakra and I'll be blown off, too little chakra and I won't stick to the tree's surface. He looked at the tree, determination shining in his eyes, and drew a kunai out of his weapons pouch to mark his progress. He began gathering chakra at his feet and sprinted towards the tree. A teenager, of about 18 years of age, had been sitting high in a tree above the clearing watching our young blonde making astounding progress with tree walking. He had untamed, wild, and somewhat curly black hair. He wore a black long-sleeved shirt that was common among Konoha shinobi attire and a dark green Junin's vest. His hitai was tied around his forehead, spiking up his hair even more. He had been walking back to the Uchiha compound from another successful mission and decided to make a detour when he heard the sound of footsteps, a kunai slashing through something, and panting. He decided to satisfy his curiosity and shunshined into a tree in the clearing once he saw the boy. From what he could see, the boy had only just started tree walking today and was almost halfway up the tree. The panting boy seemed familiar for some reason, so he decided to watch for a while. That is exactly when the boy ran past his other marks and made it halfway up. That is when he saw the boy slip. Wait. Blonde hair and with that haircut. Isn't that the Yondaimi's son? I have to hurry. Little did he know the boy didn't slip, nor was he out of chakra. As soon as he started to move, he sensed a barrage of shuriken coming his way and had to shunshin to the other side of the clearing. The boy reached the ground and pulled out a kunai from his weapons pouch. Who are you and what are you here for? Because of the distance his family put between them and Naruto and his lack of interaction with children his age, he had become somewhat aloof and cynical. This isn't what I expected. He actually reminds me a bit of Itachi, the teenager thought. I didn't expect you to be able to sense me. How do you do that anyway? He asked, genuinely curious. Naruto thought about what guy could possibly want. He noticed that he was a shinobi, so one thought crossed through his mind, shit. Did Toussaint send him here to find me? Does he know about my training? He figured that he should just play along for now. I suppose I'm somewhat of a sensor. I was able to sense you the moment you arrived in this clearing. I answered your question, now it's your turn to answer mine, Naruto replied in a cold yet demanding tone. Yep, definitely reminds me of Itachi. Teenager mused to himself as he activated his Sharingan and smirked, you're Naruto, right? The name's Shisui kid, Uchiha Shisui. I was on the way back to the Uchiha compound when I saw you training. Why are you out here anyway? Shouldn't kids your age be at the academy? Shisui noticed that his emotionless look turned into a scowl. I'm not enrolled in the academy and I won't be given a chance to for 3 more years. The raven-haired teenager's curious was immediately replaced with one of confusion after he had processed the information and tried to come to a conclusion based on that statement. Why is that? Most children from clans join the Shinobi Academy after they turn 9 years old. That is unless they are specifically being groomed and trained for the duty of the clan heir. Naruto let out a dry chuckle that sent a shiver down Shisui's spine for some unknown reason. I assure you that isn't the case. In fact, the title of clan heir will most likely be given to one of my siblings once they turn my age, and that is also the reason I'm not in the academy yet. After a moment of silence, Shisui was about to speak before Naruto raised his hand up. You know of the circumstances dealing with the sealing, correct? Shisui nodded. Demonic chakra can take years to fully assimilate itself into a Jinchuriki's body, that's why they tend to be a few years older than they look. That is also the case with my siblings. While we may only be born a few minutes apart, in reality they are close to 3 years younger than me. For some reason my parents decided to keep us together, so I can't attend the academy until I turn 12. So why aren't your parents supervising your children until then? Surely they can't expect you to sit around and do nothing for 3 more years. Shisui noticed that Naruto had a deadpan look on his face as opposed to his angry one he had a minute ago. Naruto sighed as he began his story from the very beginning. Naruto and Shisui were staring off into the distance at the setting sun as Naruto's tale was coming to a close, and that is what's written so far in my story. I'm out here because my parents have refused to train me or even acknowledge my existence. I don't want to sit back in the warmth of the Uzumaki Namikaze estate while everybody moves forwards with their lives. I want to prove to myself that my existence is worth something, that it was good that I was born. Naruto looked over to Shisui and noticed he had tears flowing down his face. Oi, stop crying. I didn't mean for this to sound like some sob story. You're a grown man for Kami's sake. And get off of me, damn it. He yelled as Shisui clung to him. Sorry kid. Sniff, it's just that. Sniff, our life stories are pretty similar, Shisui managed to get out while wiping the tears from his eyes. How so? Shisui sighed and turned back towards the sunset. You ever heard of someone named Uchiha Itachi? Naruto looked at him confused but nodded. He's my best friend, but he's also some kind of prodigy that the Uchiha clan hasn't produced since the era of warring states. Even though I'm stronger than Itachi, I'm a different kind of genius. I'm a genius of hard work, as Maida Guy would put it. I've worked my off since before I was your age, kid, and still I'm always compared to Itachi. Even my own parents told me that they wished that they had Itachi as a son instead of me. Trust me, I get where you're coming from. Naruto let out a small on that nobody has seen for a long time. From what I saw today, I can tell that you have the potential to be both Naruto. Naruto looked shocked. This was the first time all day that Shisui had called him his name. It was the first time that somebody had genuinely him like they cared for him. Shisui noticed the tears in Naruto's eyes that he refused to show. Itachi has a little sister too. She's about the age of your siblings, I think, and he's already started training her too. What do you say, Naruto? Will you become my student? That was the final damn. The tears started pouring out of his eyes. Sniff, yes. Shisui sensei. 2.5 years, that is how long it had been since Shisui had taken Naruto on as a student. It had gone by in the blink of an eye, and yet so many things had changed for him during that time. One of the things had changed was that he was actually training to be a shinobi. Serious training. Not those children's training regimens that Minato and Kushina had his siblings on, or even those taijutsu classes at the academy that he had seen a few times. No, he was going through training routines that would make Maida Guy break a sweat. What do you expect? Shisui was currently one of the top shinobi in Konoha, right beside Hatake Kakashi, Maida Guy, and Uchiha Itachi. His daily routine was to wake up at 5 a.m., before anybody at the estate was awake, eat a small breakfast and head to the Uchiha compound to meet up with Shisui. From there they would head out of Konoha and Naruto would be given the task of running at least 10 laps around the village. After which, they would head to the clearing where they met for the first time for taijutsu training. If you remember, Naruto's eyes aren't exactly normal. They aren't any kind of Kekkei Genkai, but when he was born the Kyuubi's chakra fused with them, granting him with exceptional eyesight. Shisui once referred to them as the eyes of a hawk, because they can track even high-speed movements. These unique abilities are quite similar to the Sharingan's ability to read and predict movement. It is because of this that Shisui was able to start teaching Naruto the Uchiha's interceptor fist style of taijutsu, which he excelled at. Naruto shivered as he remembered all those taijutsu spars he had with Shisui, which were actually more like beatdowns than anything. They usually ended their taijutsu training at around lunchtime, so they would usually take a break and grab a bite to eat. They would either head to the Uchiha compound to grab some homemade food, or they would head into the village and stop at a sushi bar that Naruto had taken a liking to. They stopped at Ichiraku's once for ramen, and ironically enough he wasn't very fond of the stuff. After lunch they would head back to the clearing for either ninjutsu or genjutsu training. They would switch off between the two every week. He usually returned to the Uzumaki Namikaze estate close to 7 p.m. where he ate dinner and headed up to his room to either study or meditate. On days when Shisui had missions, Naruto would usually practice his bukijutsu instead of ninjutsu or genjutsu, and he would practice his taijutsu katas in the morning instead of sparring. He had never been very interested in weapons, so kenjutsu was immediately dropped from their training regimen after he had learned the basics. He even disliked using shuriken and kunai, but they were essentials for every shinobi. He started on bukijutsu early so that he could move on to other aspects of his training. He had become so accurate with his kunai and shuriken that they could rival most junin. Ninjutsu and genjutsu were Naruto's two favorite shinobi arts. Ninjutsu because there were so many different types of jutsu and how most of the figures that were known all throughout history. Due to his sensei's specialty, one of the first things Naruto was taught was the shunshin. Not just any kind of shushin, Shisui's specialized one where he just vanishes in a flash, not so different from the Hiraishin. He loved genjutsu because the possibilities were almost limitless. Over the years the blonde had become a bit sadistic and enjoyed the idea of torturing a person's mind. For various reasons he excelled in these two areas of the shinobi arts specifically. The second thing that changed was his relationships with people outside of his family. He has always been rude and untrusting towards people who want to be his friends, especially when he would be at the park with his siblings or even on his own. It wasn't hard to tell that many of the village's children wanted to befriend him just so that they could get closer to the village's saviors. That was a main reason why he didn't attempt to get close to outsiders. Before he met Shisui he did make one friend, Inuzuka Hana, the former heiress of the Inuzuka clan. Former heiress was the key word there because she has a younger brother, Inuzuka Kiba, who happened to be friends with the three younger Uzumaki Namikazes. The fact that their siblings were friends and that they were in the same boat when it came to family relations was what gave them the chance to connect with each other and become good friends. In a family dominated by alpha males, females are often looked over by their family to raise the perfect leader of a pack. Hana's mother, Inuzuka Sume, also wanted to keep her and her brother together since they were only 2 years apart from each other. Therefore Hana wouldn't be enrolled into the Shinobi Academy either, or at least until Kiba turned 9 years old. This didn't mean that she was neglected as much as Naruto was, but it was enough for him to open up to her. After that they were often seen together around the village or at the Inuzuka compound. Besides her, he still is pretty much the same way with people, but that didn't stop him from making a handful of friends, even if he wanted to. Flashback 2 years ago, Uchiha compound. Naruto and Shisui were walking through the Uchiha district heading towards the Uchiha library. The young blonde gave his sensei a questioning look. I know you're an Uchiha, that much is obvious, but I'm pretty sure their jutsu library was made by Uchiha for Uchiha. I don't think that they would take too kindly to an outsider learning all of their jutsu. And as much as I hate to say it, me being the son of the current Hokage Dosen, exactly helped my case. Shisui looked down and gave him a smirk. As one of the top shinobi of the Konoha and the Uchiha clan, I'm granted certain rights that normal Uchiha clan members don't have, such as being able to teach whatever I want to my apprentice and bring them to the Uchiha library. It doesn't matter if they're Uchiha or not. Plus me being on the fast track to becoming an Anbu helps too. And besides, you've been training non-stop from dawn till dusk since we started your training 6 months ago. It's a beautiful day, the sun is shining, the breeze feels great. If you don't stop and take a look around you every once in a while, you just might miss all of the little things in life. Life isn't all about training, you know, kid. He was expecting some kind angry outburst or death glare that he was so used to by now, so he was surprised when Naruto stopped mid-step deep in thought. You know, sensei. Now that I think about it, I guess I do feel a bit burned out by the amount of training you've been putting me through. He began looking up and down the streets of the Uchiha district as if expecting something, and I think I already like the Uchiha district better than being in the village. No villagers bowing to me wherever I go, nobody hasn't tried to kiss my yet, no one is trying to give me free handouts, this place just feels right. Perhaps we could take the rest of the day off from training. Shisui beamed at him. Of course you weren't really going to give me a choice in the matter, were you? Naruto asked in a demanding tone. Shisui rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. The truth is, I also wanted you to meet some good people. I know how you are and what you think of people, but you should have some friends that you can depend on other than me and Hana. Naruto scowled a bit at the mention of friends but decided to think about it a bit instead of lashing out. He sighed. I guess if you trust them, then I could at least give them a chance. Shisui sighed in relief, but before he could say anything he was cut off. Hey. Wait a minute, weren't we supposed to keep you training me a secret? I haven't told them anything yet, I just decide this now. And besides, we only decided not to tell your family so that they wouldn't be able to stop you from training. By the way, have things gotten any better between you and them? Naruto just sighed in frustration. No, in fact they've gotten worse now that the training has gone to Naoki's, Natsuki's, and Narumi's heads. They act like a bunch of spoiled brats that make me want to use my strongest Kaden jutsu just to set the mansion on fire and hope they burn inside. Shisui's sweat dropped at the evil smirk on his face. Maybe you should stay at my place tonight. Naruto just nodded. The rest of the trip to the library was spent in silence. They made it into the library with only a little hassle. After explaining their relationship to each other, they were allowed to pass. Naruto ended up picking up a few Kaden jutsus that were favored by Madara Uchiha and some more intricate scrolls on Genjutsu. Shisui had tested Naruto's elemental affinity about 2 months ago and was surprised by the results. After giving him the piece of chakra paper and telling him to concentrate chakra into it, the paper split in half. One of the halves became damp, and the other half caught on fire and didn't just turn to ash but turned into a miniature fireball before disintegrating. Both of them had wide eyes and agreed to train his fire affinity first, seeing as it was the strongest, which was strange because neither of his parents had a fire affinity. Soon after, they left the library, seeing as the has gotten the more advanced Kaden jutsus that they were looking for. Naruto just let Shisui guide him to his desired location. After a good 10 minutes of walking, they finally arrived at what Naruto could guess was the house of the clan head's family. Shisui led him inside, and after taking off their shinobi sandals, they proceeded further into the house. He was then greeted with a sight that he could only describe as a perfect happy family. The first person he saw was a beautiful woman with silky black hair and a perfect heart-shaped face. She wore an apron over her gray long-sleeved shirt with the Uchiha crest on the back and a pink skirt. She was in the kitchen making lunch while her 2 children sat on the couch. One of them was a teenager, close to Shisui's age and height, with black hair that formed 2 bangs which framed his face and a ponytail in the back. He had black eyes and wore a high-collared blue shirt with black shinobi pants. This must be Shisui's friend Itachi. The one that really stood out to him was the girl sitting on her brother's lap trying to read a scroll about chakra with a confused look on her face. She had long black hair that reached down to her back and covered her right eye and had pale skin that reminded him of snow. She wore a pure white kimono with an Uchiha crest on the back. She looked about 6 years old. And this must be his little sister, Satsuki, that Shisui told me about. Hello everyone. Naruto heard Shisui call out before he was smacked in the head with a wooden spoon. How many times have I told you not to yell in the house, Shisui-kun? The woman yelled. Oi, you really have hit me with that damned spoon, Makoto-san. Makoto just smiled. I wouldn't if you would listen for once. Naruto smirked at his sensei being scolded like a child, and who might this be? Itachi and his sister looked up, now paying attention to the other new arrival. Ah yes, that's the reason we're here. This is my apprentice Naruto. Itachi chose this time to move off of the couch and speak up. Apprentice. When did you take on an apprentice? Did Hokage-sama assign you one? No offense, but you really don't seem like teaching material. Shisui puffed his cheeks out like a child. Oi, I'll have you know I'm a great sensei. Right, Naruto? Naruto. Shisui looked over to where Naruto was and noticed that Satsuki had gotten up from her seat on the couch and was now playing with Naruto's hair. He noticed Naruto's twitching eyebrow and burst into laughter. Naruto gave him a dark glare. I will kill you slowly and painfully, Shisui. Yeah, anyway it looks like she's taken a real liking to you. Kami knows why the little devil girl hates me. Satsuki stopped playing with Naruto's hair to respond to Shisui. I'm not a devil girl. I just don't like you cause you're stupid. She yelled, after which she kicked him in the groin to stop his laughing. After he got off the floor and recovered from the pain, he spoke again. Anyway, I brought him here to meet all of you. Besides me and Inuzuka Hana, he doesn't really have any friends. Makoto and Itachi both looked surprised, but Itachi is the one who responded. What do you mean, Shisui? Isn't he Hokage-sama's son? I would think that being the son of the Hokage would make plenty of children want to be his friend. Naruto looked at Shisui, who nodded. About that. Naruto then proceeded to tell all of them his story, the same one that he told Shisui 6 months ago. Itachi and Makoto both looked shocked and Satsuki just looked confused. Makoto decided to speak. Is all of that true? Minato and Kushina-chan don't even treat you like a son anymore. Naruto just nodded and looked up to see Makoto's angry face after she stood up. Then I'm going over to their compound right now to have a talk with them. Shisui was about to restrain her, but it was then that Naruto calmly spoke. Please don't, Makoto-sama. I would prefer if you left them alone. I want to see for myself if they will begin to understand what they are doing to me. If they are just so overwhelmed with their other 3 children that they continue to push me away, even after all of my efforts to become closer to them, or they just don't want to take the time to even think about me. Whatever the outcome, I don't want it to be altered by anyone from the outside, please understand. Makoto froze at his reasoning. What kind of child could possibly think like this? The risks for his relationship to turn out badly is too great, but every decision has consequences and I guess this will be theirs. After a minute, Makoto moved towards him and engulfed him in a motherly hug. If they don't show you any love or affection, then we will. You can be part of our little family. Okay. Naruto just nodded with tears in his eyes and returned Makoto's hug. Itachi got up, put a hand on Naruto's shoulder and smiled at him. Satsuki looked happy at what was going on, only understanding half of it. Do I have a new Ni-san, Ka-chan? Everybody started laughing at that, even Naruto. Shisui was watching the whole scene with a smirk on his face, succeeding in what he came here to do. Flashback end. Uzumaki Namikaze compound. Naruto had just woken up from his room in the Uzumaki Namikaze compound. It needed to be specified because over the last 2.5 years Naruto has spent most of his time at the Uchiha compound, sometimes even going as far as eating dinner and staying the night in Satsuki's room. They are not in an intimate relationship in any sense of the word, but over the past few years she had grown rather attached to her, Naruto ni, and Naruto had grown to see her as more of a sister than his actual blood-related family. Speaking of family, they had grown even further apart over the last few years. Both Natsuki and Naoki had both gone into one-tailed states before and lost control of themselves, destroying most of the training ground they were at in the process. That only resulted in their parents paying even closer attention to them, and not just during training. No, even during family outing when all 6 of them went into the village everything was always about Naoki, Natsuki, and Narumi. How they wanted new training equipment or wanted a new toy, or even what flavor ramen they wanted, completely disregarding Naruto's requests or objections. They didn't even know that ramen was one of the blonde's least favorite foods. Naruto leisurely got out of bed and got dressed. After all, it was his day off from training. He opened his bedroom door and walked downstairs. Naruto noticed that it was about 9 a.m., so his family should be finishing up breakfast and leaving for their morning training. It was these observations that brought him back to his thoughts on his family. The first was his father. He almost never had any contact with Minato anymore. Naruto usually left the house early in the morning to spend the day at a friend's house, or at least that's what he told his parents when asked. And Minato spent most of the time either training Naruto's siblings or at the Hokage Tower doing his usual duties. Naruto usually saw him at dinner, but he usually just talked to Kushina or his other 3 children how their training went. His thoughts then drifted to Kushina. The situation with her was pretty much identical to Minato's. Although because of her highly annoying temper, in Naruto's opinion, she often scolded him for being late or for missing dinner. This often ended with her asking Naruto why he couldn't be a perfect child like his siblings. This normally should have left a pain in his chest, but he stopped caring about such childish remarks from them a long time ago. The next was Naoki. Now this little cockroach was someone Naruto could say he truly hated. He started off as a sweet little kid, but after years of his parents spoiling him and giving him everything he could ever ask for, he believed that he could do no wrong and became spoiled to the core. He believed that he was Kami's gift to world. Not to mention his superiority and god complexes. And Tsunade doting on him every chance she got didn't help. Due to this he became lazy and expecting everything to handed to him. Tsunade completely adored Naoki and even gave him extra training. This was all because Minato and Kushina decided to name him after her brother who died during the Third Great Shinobi War. Speaking of Tsunade, Naruto had not once even spoken to her. Next was Narumi. She often bragged about how she was getting training and Naruto wasn't. She believed that she was better than everybody else just because she was a Jinchuriki. The foolish girl had no idea how Jinchuriki are usually treated. Narumi was a daddy's girl believing that he could do no wrong, and that's why she thought of Naruto as the loser of the family, because he was the only one not being trained. Natsuki was an odd case. She used to be a little brat, but now she just seemed indifferent to him. She had some kind of high and mighty holier than thou personality, which he found annoying, but at certain times he could believe that she cared for him. "Oh Naruto, you're usually gone by this time." It was this voice that broke him out of his thoughts. The rest of his family was standing by the door getting ready to go to one of the training fields. It was Kushina who had spoken to him. Naruto looked at Kushina and then headed towards the refrigerator. "I had nothing to do today, so I thought I'd sleep in for a bit. He's been awfully cold to us lately. Perhaps if we let him join training today he'll smile a bit." Kushina thought. "Naruto, why don't you join us for training today?" The whole room went silent. Everyone had different thoughts. Did she really just say that? After 2.5 fucking years she asks if I want to join training for the day. Ha, what a joke. What's your game, Kushina? Why should someone like me have to even share a training ground with pathetic trash like him? Were Naoki's thoughts. Narumi's hands clenched into fists. "I thought he was supposed to be some loser who wasn't even supposed to be a shinobi, and now you want him to train with us, Ka-chan." Natsuki's emotionless face cracked a small smile. Oni-sama is finally going to train with us. It has been so long since I've been able to spend time with him. Maybe Ka-chan and Tu-san will even let me spar with him. It was Minato who decided to voice his thoughts. Are you sure, Kushina? I mean, Naruto hasn't had much training before and we need to concentrate on the others in case that they lose control of the Kyuubi's chakra. Kushina had a thoughtful look on her face for a minute. We should at least let him spar with one of them to show him what he'll be up against when he starts the academy in 6 months with his siblings. Naruto gained a tick mark on his forehead. You're the ones who refused to teach me anything and forbid me from training until the academy. And besides, I have been training. I've even defeated a few Chunin from the Uchiha clan in sparring matches. Minato was silent for a few seconds. Okay. How about we let him spar with Natsuki? Natsuki had a happy look on her face. Yes. 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 Naruto could only groan, seeing as there was no way out of it. After his breakfast, they all headed out the door to one of the larger training grounds closer to the compound walls. Once they got there, Naruto and Natsuki moved toward the center, about 15 feet apart from each other, as everybody else moved towards the side. Minato decided to set the rules for the match. This will be a straight taijutsu match. There will be no use of ninjutsu or genjutsu under any circumstances. The match will end when I call it or when either one of you are unable to continue. Do you understand? They both nodded. Natsuki took this chance to speak. Ni-san. I'll use this chance to show you the difference between the two of us. To show you how strong you need to become. Naruto just scoffed at her arrogance. Begin. Natsuki rushed forward as fast as she could, hoping to end the fight quickly so that she wouldn't have to hurt her, Oni-sama, too much. Naruto used this chance to get into his interceptor fist stance. With her straightforward approach, she pulled her fist back and swung at Naruto, who sidestepped, causing her to stumble with the lack of contact. As she lost her balance, he swept Natsuki's legs out from under her, causing her to fall back. Naruto followed up with an axe kick to the gut, causing her to cough out some saliva and some of the ground to break in a spider web pattern. He jumped back as she got off of the ground and wiped the saliva from her mouth. Naruto felt how angry she was through her sensor abilities and how much chakra she was letting run wild. He steadied himself. Natsuki rushed towards her brother with newfound speed and appeared right before him. She sent a backhand towards his head, which he ducked under and retaliated with an elbow to the solar plexus, causing her to lose her breath. Naruto then connected with her chin with a fierce uppercut, after which she flew into the air. Naruto wasn't done yet. He grabbed her leg as it was in midair and threw her into the ground. Hard. He was expecting her to get up or for his father to call the match before things got out of hand, but he was too late. As soon as Naruto turned to look at his father, his was hit with a huge wave of malicious killing intent. He looked over to where his sister had landed and saw exactly what he didn't want to. Natsuki's violet eyes turned red within black slit through them. Her fangs elongated and her perfectly kept nails had turned into claws. And the worst part of all of this was that there was a crimson cloak of chakra surrounding her body, sprouting 2 fox-like tails. Just then the third tail emerged. Single quote exclamation mark. That was all it took to bring out 3 tails worth of the Kyuubi's chakra. Has she never taken a few punches before? Before Minato of Kushina could even move to suppress the Kyuubi's chakra, she disappeared in a flash of pure speed and reappeared right in front of Naruto. He barely even had time to move before she stabbed him right above the eye with one of her claws and dragged it down the length of his face, which sent him stumbling back. She jumped forward, grabbing his body. One of her claws wrapped around his right hand with the other grabbing his right calf. The sinister chakra started eating away at his flesh within milliseconds of her touching it. As quick as Natsuki grabbed him, she threw him into the ground, the impact creating a small crater. She rushed towards the middle where he was enhazed on of her claws. Her aim was to cut him in half vertically, but Naruto managed to move his body to the left a little, causing her to miss and instead slash through almost the entire right side of his body from shoulder to his abdomen. It was then that chakra chains erupted from the ground, restraining all of her limbs, as Minato appeared in front of her and attached a pre-written seal on her forehead. The Kyuubi's chakra receded and she fell to the ground, unconscious. Then Minato looked down at his son's body and his eyes widened. Naruto's right side of his face was covered in blood with a jagged slash mark through his right eye. The flesh surrounding his hand and calf were completely burned off. And the wound that really worried him was the largest one. The right side of his torso was almost completely severed from the rest of his body. The time from when Natsuki sprouted her third tail to when her chakra was suppressed was about the span of 6 seconds. There were small patches of flames on the injured parts of his body that looked like they were trying to heal him somehow, which made Minato curious, but he looked up and saw his son gushing out of his body and slowly started to drown, and it made Minato forget that thought. He heard Naruto groaned and grabbed him and Natsuki before flashing to the hospital, leaving his wife with a horror-stricken face while his other son and daughter emptied their stomachs onto the training ground with the sight of their brother and the amount of blood. Konoha Hospital. After seeing the condition that Naruto was in, he was immediately rushed to the emergency room to be operated on by Tsunade. He may not have liked the woman much, but she was a damn good doctor. With the condition Naruto was in, he should have been unconscious due to the amount of blood loss, but he had been awake for the last 3 hours. He was even awake when Minato dropped him off at the front desk and he was taken away on a stretcher while his father went with another nurse to take Natsuki to another hospital room. I can't blame him this time. I suppose he's probably checking to make sure the seal is still holding up. Naruto now understood a little bit better why his parents were so focused on his siblings, but then his face contorted with rage. But I almost just died. They, probably already finished checking up on her. The least that they could do is be here for me. Just because I understand doesn't mean that I have to forgive. With those thoughts he drifted into unconsciousness. Hokage Tower. It was a beautiful day in Konohagakure no Sato. After all, they were living at a time of peace. Every day was beautiful, the sun was shining, birds were chirping, and there was a relaxing breeze that just made you want to take a nap under one of the bountiful trees that Konoha was so famous for. It was almost like any other day in the village, almost. Namikaze Minato was not having a good day. Everything had just started out with a simple spar. The first thing that had gone wrong was that Kushina had asked Naruto if he wanted to train with them for the day. Of course Minato was against it at the time, but if he had voiced his opinion, would have probably been on the under end of Kushina's temper and most likely a beating. The next was that Naruto was actually winning the spar when they hadn't trained him, while their daughter, who had gone through daily training for the past 3 years, couldn't even touch him. That brought up more questions. How could he be so advanced in taijutsu already? Has he been training all this time? No. Naruto isn't smart enough to know how to train on his own properly. He probably just picked up a few things from watching his friends. Minato thought for a minute, who were his friends again? Oh, that's right, he usually spends time with Inuzuka, Kiba's older sister. But it looked like he was using the Uchiha's interceptor fist. Fugaku has a younger daughter, doesn't he? Perhaps Naruto is friends with her. Yes, that has to be it. His thoughts on Naruto ended there and were brought back to his daughter. This had been the second time that she had lost control in the past 6 months. In reality, none of his children were even relatively close to being able to control, or even use the Kyuubi's chakra without going berserk and trying to destroy anything in their paths. They had been training their children to try and control the Biju, but it looked as if that were never going to happen since none of them inherited their mother's chakra chains yet. What went wrong? It was just a taijutsu spar. She shouldn't have even been using chakra, let alone the Kyuubis. Did they need more training? They can't lose control of themselves every time they take a few punches. I knew we shouldn't have let Naruto train with his siblings. We needed to be focusing solely on the others so that situations like this don't happen. He couldn't help but remember the scolding he got from Kushina when she arrived at the hospital, and he couldn't even tell her what condition Naruto was in because he was checking on Natsuki's seal. Kushina understood why Minato was checking the seal instead of getting information about their son's condition, but that didn't mean she couldn't be upset with him. After all, their son almost died because their daughter gave in to her negative emotions. That only solidified the fact that they should be entirely focused on training their children to withstand the Kyuubi so that they don't hurt anyone they care about again. And this time it was far more serious than the others when they just destroyed the training grounds before they were restrained. No, this time one of them had almost killed their brother. Not to mention the fact that this was the farthest that any of them had gone with the Kyuubi's chakra. 3 tails. 3 tails. That's only 1 tail before the Kyuubi will starts taking over your body and the chakra starts eating away at your skin. We can't ever let this ever happen again, it is far too dangerous. The entire village could feel the malicious chakra of the Kyuubi and they were in mass panic. It was nowhere near the oppressing terror that so many had felt that night over 11 years ago, but it was enough for people to immediately recognize the chakra. Minato had to publicly announce what happened, minus the part about Natsuki going berserk, and tell them that everything was under control and the situation was taken care of. Some were still weary but went on with their daily lives nonetheless. The only people who knew the truth about what happened were the Uzumaki Namikaze family, Tsunade, Kakashi, and a handful of Anbu. Dealing with the council was a load of fun for him. He had to make up some kind of lie that they had an accident when dealing with the Kyuubi's chakra. Of course, Danzo made a point to ask for him to train the children, which Minato immediately refused. Minato then remembered what Tsunade had told him just a few hours ago after his conversation with Kushina and dealing with the village and the council. Flashback. Morning. Minato had just finished dealing with the council when Tsunade called him back to the hospital to inform him about his children's condition. Tsunade, how is Natsuki? She didn't suffer any repercussions from using the Kyuubi's chakra, did she? His mind had been on Natsuki all morning due to having to check the seal, thinking about her going into a 3-tailed state, and later having to talk to the village and council about her, so he was immediately concerned about her well-being. Tsunade just raised an eyebrow but answered him nonetheless, Natsuki is fine. She is suffering from chakra exhaustion and torn muscles from overexerting herself in her cubified state, but otherwise she's fine. Though she should probably spend the night in the hospital just to be on the safe side. Minato let out a sigh of relief. He was worried that if too much of the Kyuubi's chakra got into her chakra coils at one time, then it would start eating away at her chakra network. He was glad that wasn't the case. Tsunade raised the clipboard that she had in her hand up so that she could read it. Naruto, on the other hand. Minato's face instantly paled as he remembered the state that his son was in and cursed himself for forgetting how serious his wounds looked. Naruto's situation is far worse than it looked. The operation was a success and we managed to stabilize him, but not all of his wounds could be solved with medical ninjutsu alone. The entire right half from trapezius to mid-abdomen was almost completely cleaved through. We managed to repair all of his organs, internal damage, and even close the wound. He'll need immense physical therapy before he's even able to use his right side again, unless some kind of miracle happens. Next up, those burns he received. When Natsuki grabbed his right hand and right calf, the Kyuubi's chakra immediately started devouring his flesh. Had you not gotten him here when you did, it would have started invading and eating through his chakra network. There was nothing we could do about these specific wounds besides extracting the demonic chakra from them. It's likely that the skin on his right hand till about an inch above his wrist will never fully heal. The wound had pretty much already cauterized itself before you got him here. The same could be said about the burn on his calf, the only difference is that it is in the shape of a claw mark. His final wound was the slash to his eye. This wound was specifically difficult to operate on. One of Natsuki's claws slashed straight through his eyeball. Normally we would have been able to repair something like that, but with the amount of Kyuubi chakra eating away at it, we needed to remove it altogether in order to repair his nerves. Minato was speechless at the amount of damage that was done to his son's body. He gulped. Will he be able to recover? Is he awake yet? Theoretically, he should be able to make a full recovery when he wakes up, but there lies the problem. He's in a coma. We don't know when he will wake up, or even if he will wake up. A look of shock was evident on Minato's face. He didn't even ponder the possibility that Tsunade wouldn't be able to solve all of the young Hokage's problems and that they wouldn't walk out of the hospital one big happy family, or at least in Minato's mind. Little did he know what was going on in Naruto's mind as they spoke. Flashback end. Naruto's mindscape. What the hell is going on? The last thing that Naruto remembered was being operated on in the hospital, losing consciousness, and then flames. An enormous amount of flames, then feeling dizzy and waking up in this war-ridden wasteland in a body that wasn't his own. It felt like he was seeing everything from the perspective of another person. He would do everything that that person did, it would feel as if it were himself talking as this person spoke. He could even hear this person's thoughts. From what he could gather, he was in a different time period within his own mind. A time long before the formation of the hidden villages, or even before the time of the era of warring states. This was long before then. This was an era when only 3 people could wield chakra. The first was this man's mother, Otsutsuki Kagaya. The second was his brother Otsutsuki Hagoromo, and the third was his other brother, Otsutsuki Hamura. The man's body that he was trapped in was known as Otsutsuki Ace and was the only one of Kagaya's sons born without the body to wield chakra. From what Naruto could understand from the thoughts of Ace and the conversations he had, Kagaya was the progenitor of chakra. They gained this ability by eating a strange fruit that she had picked from the Shinju tree. Naruto found it strange that a fruit was the cause of chakra that every person possessed in his time, but quickly became used to the idea as he had seen stranger things happen. It was that Ace got up and looked in the mirror. What Naruto saw surprised him greatly. Ace's reflection looked like an older version of his own. The first thing that Naruto's noticed were freckles in the same area as Naruto's, on his cheeks in small clumps just under his eyes. Naruto had always found them childish. It was odd. Nobody in his family had freckles, and yet somehow he had to have inherited them from somewhere. The next thing he noticed were his eyes. They were the same shade of cold gray. This wasn't too surprising as it wasn't exactly a rare color. But it was odd. Ace's mother had the Byakugan and the Rinnegan, so did his brother. While his other brother had the Rinnegan. Even if Ace didn't possess chakra, he should have at least inherited an inactive Byakugan or something. Then he saw his hair. Ace had naturally parted pitch black hair that framed his face and refused to cover his forehead. It was coarse and wave and fell down to the bottom of his neck in the back. It was reminiscent of Naruto's own hairstyle when he didn't purposely spike it up into his father's hairstyle. Naruto's face was more angular though, similar to his father. Ace wore knee-length black shorts with an orange eyelet-studded belt, and a button-up pale yellow shirt. He also wore an orange cowboy hat with 2 smileys, a smiling and a frowning face that were connected by red beads. 2 long side strps came down from his hat and met at a medallion of a bull's skull on his chest. He wore a red beaded necklace around his neck. His attire was far different from the dress of the other Otsutsukis who usually wore traditional robes. Ace of course had his trademark tattoos. The first vertically read ASCE with the S crossed out on his left bicep. He got this one in memory of his best friend Sabo, who died after standing up against Kagaya, telling her that she was abusing her power and should use it to help bring peace towards the world. He was killed by her not long after, but news of his actions had already reached the ears of many and started a rebellion. The second was a purple skull with crossbones shaped in a cross-like pattern behind it. The skull had white eyes and a large crescent-shaped mustache. This was a tribute to his father, Otsutsuki Newgate Edward. He was the first person to ever show Ace that someone was happy that he was born. They were similar in more than just appearance as well. Ace was more intelligent than even his brothers and was rather polite when the situation called for it, but out of those times he was often rude and aloof, especially to people who tried to order him around or demand something from him. However, he was always in the shadow of his mother and even his brothers. Ace's mother was the ruler of this era and was often referred to as the rabbit goddess for bringing peace to the world with her unrivaled power. However, after she gave birth to triplets, her power began to cloud her judgment and soon resorted to trying to control mankind by force, and people began to see her as a demon rather than a benevolent goddess. Because of what his mother was becoming, he often questioned his own right to exist. He believed that, with what his mother was doing and how she ruled over humans like a tyrant, if he were to die nobody in the world would care, as nobody wanted the son of the devil to live. He never sought after true peace like Hagoromo did, or to lead his clan towards a better future like Hamura did. No, all he ever sought after was the answer to his lifelong question of whether he had truly been born. Ace never really cared about world peace or anything like that. It was too much of a naive dream for someone like him. He knew that any kind of peace wouldn't last and that there would be war with or without chakra for any reason that humans could possibly think of. Ace may not have believed in peace, but there were a few things that he did believe in. Freedom and family. He would do whatever it took to help his brothers achieve their dreams. That is what family is for, right? And Kagaya was a tyrant who was slowly taking freedom away from the people of the world. These were two things that Ace would willingly fight and die for. He knew that Kagaya that was close to finding them, but he was going somewhere where he knew that he would find answers, the Shinju tree, where his mother attained this power. He had read a legend recently that only once every millennium would the tree bear a true chakra fruit. However, this legend also stated that 2 decades after the first chakra fruit would be eaten, 5 more would be formed. Though these 5 wouldn't be as strong or as versatile. The 5 fruits each contained a specific element, and once eaten could even give the user the power to turn into that element. Only one person would be able to eat each fruit though. The fruits were supposed to make the user intangible, which would make any person seem like they were invincible, but he knew that wouldn't be enough to stop his mother. He would need the help of others along with his brothers. He had finally made it to the tree and saw the 5 strange-looking fruits hanging from several different branches. She had always been extremely protective of that tree, so he had to hurry. She never wanted anyone to have that kind of power besides her. He climbed up it and reached for an orange fruit with flame-like markings covering the outside. He gulped and took a bite. Naruto watched vividly as Ace's entire life depicted the defeat and sealing of Otsutsuki Kagaya, the creation of the Biju, how chakra was passed on to humans, how after going off on his own to travel changed his name from Otsutsuki Ace to Portgas D. Ace, and finally where Ace planned to have his chakra fruit reincarnate when he died. At Ace's eventual death, Naruto was ejected out of his mind. Naruto's hospital room, Natsuki Pav. Natsuki was watching Naruto like she usually did whenever she had time. It had been 4 months since he had fell into a coma. Natsuki had felt so guilt-ridden all those months ago when she woke up and found out that she caused her brother so much pain and suffering. She cried for the better part of the day when she found out that he may never wake up. She had refused to even leave his room for a week. It was only when her parents had gotten on their knees and begged her to come home that she finally listened. Though she does come back every day to visit him for hours on end. After spending so much time with him in the hospital room, she became even more attached. Natsuki had met a lot of the people that Naruto could say was his family. She had met Inuzuka Hana, Uchiha Makoto, Uchiha Itachi, Uchiha Shisui, and Uchiha Satsuki. She grew immediately jealous that her, Oni-sama, knew girls besides her, and such pretty ones at that. The ones that came to visit the most were Satsuki, Hana, and Makoto. Itachi was an Anbu and Shisui was always being sent on Anbu missions and had his duties in the Uchiha police force as well. Kushina and Minato had only come to visit a handful of times, and that was either when they had come with Natsuki or when they came to drag her back home. They stopped coming after the first few weeks. Hana and her became friends after a few months, while Makoto didn't want anything to do with her at first because of how Naruto's family treated him. But Makoto decided to give the girl a chance and they could now hold a civil conversation. Her and Satsuki did not get along at all, mostly because Satsuki had decided that Natsuki didn't deserve her Naruto needs forgiveness or love. For anyone watching the two, they would just see a cat fight between two little girls with huge brother complexes. Natsuki brought herself out of her thoughts and stared at the motionless form of her brother. She had a sad smile on her face. Oni-sama. I hope you wake up soon. Hokage Tower. Minato was sitting on his desk finishing up all of the paperwork that had accumulated over the week due to spending so many hours training his children. They had really focused more on using the Kyuubi's chakra, so that they wouldn't lose control, should it ever try to take them over like what happened to Natsuki. Even Nawaki had actually trained a little more. A little. He was still lazy and refused to do much hard work, but it was better than nothing. Minato had noticed that Natsuki was getting even more depressed as the days went on. She still blamed herself for what happened to Naruto and would spend most of her time in his hospital room. At first he was concerned with Nawaki's and Narumi's lack of concern about Naruto, but he later put off the thought, thinking that they were probably greatly disturbed with the amount of blood they saw and didn't want to see their brother in that condition. He was half right, their minds were scarred from the amount of blood, but they wouldn't ever really put any thought into Naruto's condition. He had been busy the last few months, he could barely make any time to spend with his children. Tensions were rising within Konoha, and as something wasn't done it could spell the end of Konoha as he knew it. From the spies that he had in the Uchiha clan, he had found out that they were planning a coup d'état. If they went through with it, could cause a civil war within Konoha which would give other nations a chance to invade and overtake the village. It was the worst case scenario. Minato knew he had to do something, but for now he would be patient and see if they could come to a peaceful negotiation. The Uchiha were one of the founding clans of Konoha, but over the years they had lost power and influence. One of the causes was that night over 11 years ago when the Kyuubi escaped from its seal. There were many eyewitnesses who claimed that they had seen the design of the Sharingan eye in the eyes of the Kyuubi, suggesting that sometime after its escape it was caught under the control of an Uchiha and used to cause mass destruction and death before it was resealed. If it really was the Uchiha who were responsible for that act of terrorism on the leaf, and they would be dealt with accordingly, but Minato's spies denied all knowledge of any Uchiha wielding an eye strong enough to control a Biju. The last person to be able to fully subdue a Biju with visual prowess alone was Madara Uchiha, and he was killed by the Shadaime Hokage after his betrayal. However, it cannot either be confirmed nor denied that the Kyuubi was being controlled, and yet the Uchiha slowly lost all of their political power and were segregated to the outskirts of Konoha. It didn't help the village's cause that every Hokage up to date has led the village according to the Senju's ideals. The Shadaime and Nadaime Hokages were both Senju by blood and helped to found the village and make it into what it is today. The Sandaime Hokage was the student of Senju Tobirama, the Nadaime Hokage, and was also trained by Senju Hashirama, the Shadaime Hokage. After being directly trained by two of the previous Hokages, Sarutobi Hiruzen adopted many of their principles and beliefs. The Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Minato, was trained by Jiraiya, one of Sarutobi's prized students and one of the Sannin. All of the Hokages had led the village with the beliefs of the Senju, always trusting their judgment. After years of being oppressed, they had finally reached their breaking point and there would be no going back. Minato was broken out of his thoughts as he sensed someone land on the roof just outside of the office and climb through the window. Sensei, I didn't expect you to be back so soon. I would have thought that you would at least stop by the hot springs for a few hours to do your research. The Toad Sage let out a chuckle. Normally I would have, but the information I have is too important. Minato's face lost all of its playfulness from before. The Toad summoned me to Mt. Myoboku a few days ago. They came to me with a prophecy. Minato immediately remembered how seriously the Toads take their prophecies. The previous one Jiraiya believed was about him and how he would bring peace to the elemental nations. It hasn't happened yet, but believed it would someday. What did they say, sensei? Jiraiya closed his eyes as he remembered what the prophecy was. They told me that a child born from great power but with memories of old shall pave the way toward a new era of peace. Whether they walk the path of light or is forced into the darkness shall determine what the future will hold. Their predecessor has already burned the path for them, but it shall be their will of fire that determines whether they will walk it or forge their own. Minato, I believe that the child the prophecy speaks about is either Nawaki, Narumi, or Natsuki. I'd like to let them sign the Toad contract when on their birthday. Minato looked shocked. Are you sure they're ready? And they've already signed Tsunade's slug contract too. Can a person even hold two contracts at once? Jiraiya just nodded. I have already spoken to Tsunade about this. She and the slugs both agreed, so it should be fine. Besides, their birthday is still 2 months away and they'll start the academy a few weeks after, so it'll be perfect. Minato looked excited for the first time in weeks. Okay, I'm sure they'd love it. I think I'll teach them how to summon after they start the academy. Jiraiya nodded and left out the window to do his research. Minato could hear him giggling as soon as he left. Little did they know that they couldn't be more wrong about the prophecy. Naruto's hospital room. It was dark, almost midnight. Visiting hours were over long ago and only nurses working the night shift could be seen around the hospital. Though if you were to look into one of the rooms you would see a skinny, frail-looking blonde stirring. His fingers would twitch every now and then. Groans could be heard escaping his mouth and his breathing became irregular. Then there were flames. Orange-red flames surrounded his body and he started glowing. After the flames disappeared from view, anybody would be shocked at what they saw. Gone was the skinny and frail build that looked as if he would break if you pushed him over, and laying there was a tanned muscular blonde that looked as if he didn't have an ounce of body fat on him. Naruto slowly took off the oxygen mask that was hooked up to life support and tried to open his eyes. The key word was tried because there were bandages covering his forehead and the entire right side of his face. He unhooked himself from all of the machines, pulled himself to the side of the bed and sat up. The first thing he noticed when he opened his left eye was that almost all of his body was covered in medical bandages. He noticed that he was in a hospital room and his mind tried to come up with the possibilities of why he was there. It was then that flashes of his fight with Natsuki made their way into his mind. Oh yeah, Natsuki lost control during our spar and almost killed me. I guess living someone else's memories in fast forward messes with your memory a little. They were real, right? Of course they were too real to be any kind of dream. I must have been out for a while if I was on life support. It was then that he headed towards the bathroom to see why he had all those bandages on him. Naruto slowly got up off of the bed and stumbled a little due to not walking for so long. After a minute or so he managed to recover and walked into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. What he saw made him realize that his first assessment was correct. The entire right side of his body was covered in bandages. Naruto then noticed the length of his hair. It had grown considerably and resembled a hairstyle that Uchiha Madara had favored. He noted that what he had on were solely medical bandages so that any wounds he had received under them would be able to breathe and heal over time. He closed his eyes and braced himself for what he would see. Not wanting to make any conclusions until all of the bandages were off, he proceeded to unwrap them with his eyes closed. He unwrapped the last of the bandages and let them fall to the floor at his feet. He opened his left eye, for some reason his right wouldn't open, and stood in front of the body-length mirror with a speechless expression. His mind was blank and couldn't even form words for a minute. The first thing he did was move closer to the mirror and forcibly opened his right eyelids with his index finger and thumb. It was then that all his worries were confirmed. His eye was gone. Naruto removed his fingers from his face and focused more on the large scar over where his eye used to be. He traced his hand over its length and chuckled dryly at its design. The scar itself reached from his mid-forehead on the right side of his face and extended through his eye and ended to the right of his mouth in a lightning bolt pattern. Yep, a freaking lightning bolt. His eyes then moved downward and saw the scar that started near his trapezius and ended just a few inches above his waistline. It was several inches thick with fraying edges every inch or two. He felt every centimeter of the scar with his right hand and cringed, remembering what the pain of being sliced open felt like. By all means he should have bled out. It was then that Naruto noticed that the skin on his right hand was burned off. The burn extended to an inch or two above his wrist. There wasn't a single patch of skin left in that area. What caught his sight next was that the burn on his leg had the same characteristics as his hand, only in the shape of a claw. All in all, he was a mess, but for some odd reason he smiled. Battle scars, huh? Proof that I fought and survived. I suppose that it's fitting for the past to mark me before moving on to a new future. With those thoughts in mind, he walked out of the bathroom and the hospital room he had been staying in and moved into the hallway. He looked out the window of the hallway while walking. Must be close to midnight. Konoha Hospital front desk. Naruto had just arrived in the lobby of the hospital and was only a few feet away from the front desk when all of the nurses turned to him in shock. Uzumaki Namikaze-sama, you're awake. You shouldn't be standing. You've been in a comatose state for a while now. Your body shouldn't even be able to function right now. The head nurse looked at him and saw that he was only wearing a pair of elastic shorts. In fact, your body was frail and weak yesterday. I don't know how you recovered so quickly. Even with medical ninjutsu, that should be impossible. Naruto looked at her with a blank face. I am fine, there is no need for your concern, but thank you. Now can you tell me how long I've been out for? The nurse looked shocked when he claimed to be fine. If I remember correctly, you've been in a coma for a little 4 months now. Oh, I need to contact your parents, please stay here. With that, the head nurse left the hospital and left only a few of the other nurses behind. One of the other nurses decided to speak up. She'll be right back after contacting your parents. If you have any other questions about what has been going on while you've been in your coma, please feel free to ask us and we'll answer to the best of our ability. Naruto looked at her thoughtfully. Do you keep visitors' logs for specific patients? The nurse looked at him oddly. Yes we do. In fact, yours should be right around here. She reached under the desk and pulled out a small booklet of sign-in sheets labeled Room 304. He started flipping through the pages, and predictably enough, Nawaki and Narumi had only visited the day that he was brought in, and he could count the times that Kushina and Minato visited on one hand. He smiled softly when he saw Hana's, Makoto's, Satsuki's, Itachi's, and Shisui's names written down. What surprised him the most was Natsuki. She had visited him every day that he had been in the hospital. It made him a little happy that at least someone in his old family still cared about him. Perhaps she just feels bad that she was the one who put me in there. Perhaps I should give her chance. We may never be family ever again, but that doesn't mean I should forsake her completely. After all, a family isn't a group of people related to one another by blood. My memories of the Otsutsuki clan prove that. No. A family is a group of people who will do anything for each other and will love each other unconditionally. Hana, Makoto, Satsuki, Shisui, Itachi, they are my family. It was at that point that the head nurse returned with Minato, Kushina, and Natsuki in tow. I figure I should just play as part of the perfect, happy, little family for now. At least a little. Minato and Kushina just stood there with happy little smiles plastered on their faces, not realizing his thoughts. However, as soon as Natsuki saw him, she charged him at her top speed and glomped onto him, sobbing into his chest. He could hear the muffled cries of, "I'm sorry," and, "It's all my fault," as he lovingly rubbed the back of her head. She looked up into his eyes, and sobbed, even hurt her, noticing all of his scars. The scars that she caused. Natsuki was just glad to have him back, and now they could become even closer than before. Poor Natsuki. Her dream may have come true had Namikaze Minato not been their father. It was a cold fall morning for the people of Konoha in early October. It had been a rough few months for Naruto especially. He had woken up from his coma 2 months ago and there were several things irritating him at the moment. The first was his physical condition. For some odd reason, or innate power, his body was in the same condition as it had been almost 6 months ago, but that didn't mean that he was without problems. Naruto had to begin his training from the ground up because his muscles had not been used for any kind of strenuous activity for months. Though that problem was rather easy to fix after several weeks of physical therapy and starting back up on his training regimen again. The second was Natsuki. She had become far too attached for Naruto's liking. At first he had thought that it was kind of sweet that she was worried for him, but now it was just pissing him off. She would cling to him whenever she could and her eyes would start tearing up every time that she had looked at his face because of the scar. And of course she was still blaming herself for it. Naruto knew that his accident wasn't completely her fault and didn't really blame her for it, but it didn't exactly drive them closer. Natsuki had started babying Naruto unnecessarily. Every time that he would try to leave the house she would try to stop him, thinking that she would lose him again. Needless to say, Naruto had to resort to shunshining everywhere just so he wouldn't have to deal with her. Naruto had not been able to use his chakra at all while in his comatose state, so his training with Shisui had to start from the ground up once again. He could still remember their reactions to when he walked into the Uchiha compound the day after his dismissal from the hospital. Flashback. 2 months ago. It was the morning after Naruto had been discharged from the hospital and he was on his way to the Uchiha compound. It had taken some doing to get used to using his body again, but he managed. It's been a long time since I've been here, huh? I wonder how they will react once they see me, were his thoughts as he walked up to the main gates of the Uchiha compound. Naruto was walking through the streets of the Uchiha district and noticed all of the stares he was getting. At first the young blonde was confused as to why he was receiving all of the attention, but then it hit him. News about what happened to me must have spread through the village. It's not that often that your morning is greeted with the one-eyed son of the Hokage with a lightning bolt engraved into his face. Naruto wasn't too fond of the scar on his face. Sure, it was kind of cool, but it looked like something out of a manga to him. How ironic. He was broken from his thoughts as he arrived right in front of his destination. The Uchiha clan head's house. Naruto had never met Fugaku before. Every time that he was over at the Uchiha compound, Fugaku was either at meetings with the clan elders or attending to his clan duties. But from what he had heard, Makoto's husband had a stick shoved pretty far up his and was far too absorbed in the beliefs of the Uchiha clan to even make time for his wife. Naruto knocked on the door a few times before waiting for someone to answer. He then heard footsteps in a distinctly feminine voice. Hold on, I'll be right there. The door slowly started to open a few moments later. What can I do for? Makoto just stared down slightly at Naruto with a shocked look on her face. Naruto just smiled softly at her. It's good to see you again after so long, Makoto-sama. It was then that Makoto was broken out of her frozen state and hit him over the head with the wooden spoon that was in her hand. How many times have I told you to call me Makoto-chan? Am I Kota-chan? She yelled tearfully and pulled him into a tight motherly hug. Hi Makoto-chan. I've missed you. Naruto returned the hug toward his mother figure. They stayed like that for a few minutes as Makoto let all of her tears out. Makoto pulled away and wiped the tears from her eyes. Why don't you come? I'm sure Satsuki and Shisui would love to see you. Sniff. I wish Itachi was here to see you again too though. He has been busy with his Anbu duties over the past few months, but he visited you in the hospital when he had the time. We all did. It was then that they walked into the living room and Makoto called out to her daughter and nephew, Satsuki-chan. Shisui-kun. Guess who came over to visit? A few moments later Shisui walked out of the bathroom sleepily, toothbrush still in his mouth. Who could it possibly be to get you this worked up? Am I? Shisui stopped his question as his eyes traveled to the long blonde-haired boy with a large scar on his face. He stared at the boy for a minute before his eyes widened. realizing who it is. Naruto. Is that really you, Naruto? Naruto smirked. Does it really take you that long to recognize your own student sensei? We've known each other for over 3 years, you should be able to recognize me by now. I see you still have your poor manners as always. Makoto could only stifle a laugh at the student and teacher interaction. Shisui was rooted in his spot. His toothbrush had long since fallen out of his mouth and landed on the floor. He couldn't believe it. The student who many of the doctors told him would never wake up, including Tsunade herself, was standing in front of him. Sure, he had a few changes to his appearance, but it was definitely him. Nobody else was that rude or sarcastic with him. It just had to be him. That was when Satsuki chose to walk out of her room, still half asleep and in her pajamas. What's going on? She asked in her cute little voice as she yawned. It was then that she noticed that there was one extra person in the room. It was her, Naruto ni. But he looks so different. Whatever, he's still my favorite ni-san. Yes, over the years she grew far more attached to him, and with Itachi always gone on his Anbu duties, she wound up spending much more time with Naruto. Because of this, she always played with him and watched him train. There were even times that she refused to sleep in her own bed, opting to cuddle up with her Naruto ni in the guest bedroom. She really did love her Naruto ni. She even had dreams about him sometimes. Satsuki knew that her ni-san was in a coma and they didn't know if he would wake up, and that made her sad. So much so that her dreams about them spending time together only increased. Because of this, she thought that him standing there in her living room was just another dream, so she wanted to make the most of it. She walked up to Naruto and just hugged him tightly and looked up at him with tears threatening to fall. I love you, Naruto ni. Even if you are a dream, never leave me alone again. Shisui got out of his shock and smiled sincerely at the scene, while Makoto just cooed at cute they looked together. Naruto cupped her chin and raised her head up so that she was looking into his eye. Satsuki, I promise I won't leave you ever again. I'm not going to be dying that easily anytime soon. Satsuki clung onto him even tighter. By the way, what do you mean dreams? I'm right here. Satsuki-chan, have you been having dreams about me? Naruto asked in a teasing tone. Needless to say, Satsuki flushed red with embarrassment after realizing that she was wide awake, which caused everyone in the room to erupt in laughter. They spent the rest of the day catching up with each other. Naruto was naturally curious about everything that happened while he was unconscious, and the Uchihas were curious about his new scars and appearance. It was decided that Shisui would help him get back on track with his training before the academy started in a couple of months. Flashback end. It was October 10th. Some believed that this day was cursed because of all the things that had happened on this day: the Kyuubi attack, the birth of the Uzumaki Namikaze quadruplets, and the death of the Sandaime Hokage. Little did they know that another event would be engraved into that curse as of tonight. As of this moment, Naruto was cursing the Sandaime Hokage for creating the academy. It was the most pointless and boring thing he could ever think of doing at this moment. He had learned everything that the academy had to offer already. He had mastered the henge, kawarimi, and bunshin ages ago, and he heard that people actually failed to graduate because they couldn't perform them. He just couldn't fathom it. Naruto had started the academy 2 months ago, and guess what he found out? The entire first year of the academy is devoted to language, mathematics, history, physical education, etc. There were classes for civilian students. The blonde could not actually believe that his parents wanted him to wait to train until the academy started. He would essentially be wasting another year. The only redeeming quality about today was that it was the Kyuubi festival, where the villagers and shinobi would celebrate the Yondaime's defeat of the Kyuubi in a festival going on in the center of the village. Because of this, class got out at noon so that everybody could get ready for the celebrations. Now Naruto didn't care about this. What he did care about that it was his and his siblings' birthdays. Unlike his siblings, however, Naruto wasn't excited for the party they would be having tonight or all of the gifts that he would receive. No, Naruto would usually spend the night on top of the Hokage monument after receiving a few gifts from the people that actually mattered to him. He would sit on the Sandame's head and wonder thoughts such as, was it good that I was born? Would anybody cared if I died? He had always pondered his own existence and had trouble accepting his parentage, seeing as how they had never shown him the kind of love that a child should receive. Naruto had even more to think about now as his values were similar to Ace's and he had found his answer only at his death. He was brought out of his musing as Satsuki grabbed his hand and dragged him out of the classroom towards the Uchiha compound. I guess class already ended and I was too preoccupied with my own thoughts to notice. They finally made it to the Uchiha district and started walking through the streets. It was then that Naruto's thoughts ran wild as he noticed everyone looking over at him nervously. Why does everyone look so nervous around me? It can't be because I'm an outsider. I always come here. I've noticed before too, pretty much all of the Uchiha except the children have been looking pretty on edge the past month or two. Especially when I'm around. Could it be because of how close I am to Satsuki because she's a member of the clan head's family? No. That doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Perhaps it is because I'm the Hokage's son. If that's the case, then they're probably planning something. Whatever it is, it can't be good. A normal 12-year-old boy wouldn't notice such things, but it can be said that Naruto is a genius or some type of prodigy, only second to Itachi. I suppose there's no use worrying about it at the moment. I might as well just enjoy spending today with my family. With those thoughts in mind, they arrived at the house and took off their shinobi sandals before heading into the living room. The only ones there were Makoto and Hana. Happy birthday, Naruto! They both shouted. Naruto looked around and noticed that neither Shisui nor Itachi were there. Makoto noticed him looking around and chose this moment to speak. Sorry Naruto-kun, but Shisui and Itachi aren't here. They were called to the Hokage Tower earlier today. Her eyes looked sad at that last part and Naruto noticed that, but they did leave behind gifts in case they didn't see you later on today. Naruto noticed that Makoto was forcing a smile. Makoto-chan, you know I don't believe in celebrating my birthday. Hana voiced her own opinion on the matter. We all know how you feel. Just don't think of this as a birthday party then, just all of spending the day together. Now go ahead and open your presents. Makoto nodded and handed Naruto a navy blue box with a red rope tied around it. He opened the box and found two things. The first was a pure black eye patch. A chuckle escaped his mouth after seeing the present. The second was a scroll. He opened the scroll and gasped. This is. It was Makoto who answered him. That is from Itachi. It's his own personal scroll of all of the genjutsu that he know or has created. He thought that you might like it seeing as how you're quite interested in genjutsu. Naruto was left speechless. I don't know what to say. Makoto smiled sadly, knowing that these would be the final gifts he received from part of his family. Now for Shisui-kun's gift. She grabbed another box. This one was black and had the Uchiha's clan emblem on the front of it. Naruto opened the box and saw a thicker black scroll. He tried to open it but couldn't. Question mark. Naruto was surprised at not being able to read his sensei's present. Makoto saw his surprised expression and figured that she should explain. This scroll contains every jutsu that Shisui-kun knows as well as a few that he thought that you might like. Naruto's shock only grew. Every jutsu that Shisui-sensei knows. Sensei is the most powerful Uchiha of this generation and knows dozens of different jutsus. But still, that doesn't explain why I can't open the scroll. As you may have noticed, you're not able to open it just yet. Certain circumstances must be met before it'll open for you, but he said that those circumstances should be met sooner rather than later. Naruto noticed Makoto's downcast expression. Okay, something has to be going on. Makoto is always so sweet and energetic, she's almost never sad. And both Shisui and Itachi not being here. Why would Minato call them to the Hokage Tower? He should be helping to set up for the party tonight. Maybe I should show up to the party for once just to see what's going on. Makoto noticed Naruto looking at her suspiciously and decided to take his mind off of whatever he was thinking, knowing that he was too smart for his own good. Okay, everyone, time for cake. That brought Naruto out of his musings. Whatever, I'll figure it out later. Hokage Tower, Meeting Room 2 p.m. The Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Minato, was sitting behind a long desk inside of the Hokage's personal meeting room. Sitting beside him were all three of the elders, Homura, Kahara, and Danzo. In front of them were two kneeling Anbu operatives, Uchiha Shisui and Uchiha Itachi. These two were Minato's spies inside of the Uchiha clan. They had just finished reporting all of the information they had on the Uchiha's plan for the coup d'etat. Minato rubbed the bridge of his nose. He really wished that it didn't have to come to this. Is that everything you could gather? Did they really plan to revolt against Konoha? Shisui closed his eyes and let out a sigh. Hi Hokage-sama. The children have no idea that the rest of the clan plans on doing this though. The only one who has spoken against it is Uchiha Makoto and has refused to participate in the coup. Minato was glad that his wife's friend was still on their side. Where will she be tonight? Itachi chose to reply. She is one of the only Uchiha to have relation with those outside of the clan. Tonight she should be at your children's birthday party, Hokage-sama. Minato smiled, knowing that she would be spared should things not go as planned. If the Uchiha have decided to wage war on Konoha, then we will have no choice but to judge them as traitors to the village. Kahara declared. Homura decided to voice his opinion. Yes, I believe that is the correct course of action. We need to deal with them now before they take action and cost us the lives of countless shinobi and civilians in a conflict with the village. Danzo looked impassively as Minato, already having plans of his own. You know what you must do, Minato. Are you willing to risk the lives of everyone in the village based on the actions of one clan? Minato just sighed. If this situation isn't taken care of, then it will cause a civil war inside of Konoha. Any war will suffer losses on both sides. I am not willing to risk the lives of the villagers based solely on the actions of the Uchiha. Should a civil war break out and the other hidden villages catch wind of it, then it will give them a chance to invade the village while we are weak. If this problem is not taken care of before the revolt, then it may as well lead to the Fourth Great Shinobi War. All those in the room came to the same conclusion. Minato continued, I have a plan to take care of this. Shisui, you have the most powerful eyes seen in several generations of Uchiha. I need you to put Fugaku under your control for as long as you can. I need you to bide me as much time as possible until I can come up with a way to negotiate peacefully with the Uchiha. Shisui nodded. Tonight during my children's party and the Kyuubi festival, I want you to place this genjutsu on him. The Uchiha do not usually come to either of these events, so it will be the perfect opportunity. Minato sighed. However, I do have a backup plan should you fail or if the Uchiha catch wind of our plan. This caught the attention of both the Uchiha and the elders in the room. Itachi, Shisui, you are to separate the moment you leave this office and are not to make contact with each other until 5 p.m. exactly, which is when your mission will start. Itachi, you are to wait outside the main gates of the Uchiha compound, and should Shisui not arrive at exactly 5 p.m., then you are to exterminate the Uchiha 1 hour later. Everyone in the room gasped as they heard Minato's plan. They were expecting to hear a plan such as this, but expecting and hearing are two different things. Though you are to leave anyone under the age of 12 alive since they have nothing to do this coup d'etat, and your mother should she be at the compound. Itachi, should it come to this, then you are to leave this village as a nuke nin. Itachi nodded. Good, then you are dismissed. Let us hope that everything goes smoothly tonight. Danzo had his own thoughts on his mind. I cannot let Shisui succeed. They are traitors who have gone against Konoha and will do it again if they receive the chance. If my plan works, then I shall gain the Mangekyo Sharingan and all of the Sharingan left in the corpses of the Uchiha. Konoha Forest, 4 p.m. Uchiha Shisui was not having a good day. First he found out that the coup d'etat was going to take place tomorrow. Then he had to miss his student's birthday party because he had to report to the Hokage and the elders. Then he is given the order to place the Uchiha clan head under his genjutsu to control him, and now before he could make it to the Uchiha compound to perform his mission he was intercepted by Danzo. Shisui had already known that Danzo would have some kind hidden agenda, so he was ready. This fact alone was the reason that Shisui still had both of his eyes. Danzo had tried to give him some kind of speech about protecting the leaf his own was and came at him with the intention to steal his eye. However, Shisui caught his wrist and put him under a powerful Sharingan genjutsu. He knew it wouldn't last though. As soon as the Uchiha activated his Sharingan, he noticed the chakra in Danzo's right eye. It was the same chakra color as a Sharingan. Shisui immediately realized that the only reason that Danzo would have the Sharingan was to use the Izanagi, a forbidden jutsu of the Sharingan that allows the user to alter fate. However, the cost of using it is blindness in the eye that was used. He quickly shunshined to his left and sure enough the Danzo that he was looking at disappeared and another reappeared right behind where he used to be standing. "How did you manage to see through my Izanagi?" Danzo asked, annoyed. "Did you really think that any illusion could escape my Sharingan?" The one-eyed man sighed. "I suppose I'll have to approach this differently then." Danzo signaled for his root to come out of the shadows and appear before him. 20 shinobi wearing blank porcelain masks and regular Anbu attire shunshined onto the battleground. 2 more appeared in different clothing though. Both of them wore short-sleeved black jackets with high collars and red straps. Both of them also had tantos strapped to their backs. The first one had shoulder-length orange hair and wore his black jacket open with a brown kimono-like shirt underneath. The second one had short black hair, wore a strange mask covering the top half of his face. He wore clothing similar to an Abarame's under his jacket. He recognized these two as Yamanaka Fu and Abarame Torun. Both of them were members of his graduating class back at the academy. He had always wondered what happened to them. Shisui stared at the root, assessing them. "A bit excessive if you ask me. I mean, I am only one man and yet you send some of your best operatives after me along with yourself. You must be getting old, Danzo." Danzo just stared at him impassively. "It is quite the contrary actually. You are the strongest Uchiha to have been born in generations. But that ends now. I will take your eyes and then retrieve the eyes from the Uchiha corpses that Itachi will leave behind. I shall protect Konoha with my own 2 hands. I can't let him go through with any of that. It will go against everything that we have been working towards. I need to take care of him now." Shisui started weaving hand seals and finally ended in the tiger seal. Kaden, Gukakyu no Jutsu. Shisui breathed out a large fireball that was aimed straight for Danzo. As the large fireball moved closer, all of the roots started weaving hand seals. Sweden, Mizoripa. Large torrents of water escaped from each of their mouths and met the oversized fireball in the middle of the field. Their collision produced a steam that covered the entire field. It was a bad idea to counter on their part when they could have easily dodged. Shisui could easily sense their chakra signatures while in the steam and proceeded to make his move. The Uchiha shunshined across the battlefield, drew his tanto, and proceeded to slit the throats of 5 root agents before someone realized what he was doing. 2 charged him, but were easily disabled by a Sharingan, genjutsu, and their chests slashed open with a tanto enhanced with Kaden chakra. Futon. Daitapa. Danzo let loose a large gust of wind to blow away the steam, but by then Shisui had already killed 3 more of his root agents. Shisui sheathed his tanto and reached behind him into the 2 weapons pouches on his belt. A group of 6 root began to charge him with kunai in hand, but after they had taken their first few steps, Shisui shunshined in between the group and let loose a barrage of shuriken, killing them instantly. I'm glad that most of Danzo's root are only mid-chunin to low jonin level shinobi. Had they been more skilled, I may have already been dead by now. Shisui jumped back and started to quickly go through his hand signs, hoping to finish all of them off. Kaden. Zukoku. He unleashed a small feeball towards them which erupted into a giant firestorm, causing widespread destruction and incinerating a large part of the forest they were in. Danzo. Fu, and Torun managed to get out of the blast radius, but they were forced to dodge the flying debris that the jutsu caused. The 4 remaining root were not as fortunate and were incinerated instantly. What was the previous battlefield was now nothing more than crater and completely scorched debris. Many of the trees were still on fire, creating even more shadows, and the setting sun wasn't going to make it easier to find them. Danzo, Fu, and Torun were nowhere in sight. The young Uchiha knew that they had escaped his last jutsu and were now waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Fu is a Yamanaka, so he will specialize in mind techniques, and Torun is an Aburame, so he'll be using bug techniques. If I remember correctly, he specialized in venomous bugs, which is why he always wore so much clothing. They'll probably try to work together to bring me down. It's likely that they are the strongest shinobi that Danzo has in his route. They'll probably be at least mid-Jonin level. I'll need to be careful. I need to take care of them first, and then I can focus on Danzo. He was right. Out of the corner of his eye, the Sharingan picked up the movement of 2 people moving out of the forest shadows. He jumped to the right to dodge a barrage of kunai that would have killed him had he not seen it. They charged him, moving in a zigzag pattern, and tried to overwhelm him with taijutsu. Then Fu unsheathed his tanto while Shisui pulled out his own. They engaged in a fierce kenjutsu match, trading blow for blow, sparks flying everywhere. Shisui slowly overwhelming him, but just as he was about to take control, he jumped back to avoid a punch from Torun. Shisui noticed that the ground where the punch connected was being eaten away by a strange purple substance. Those must be his nano-sized poisonous insects. It seems that they corrode whatever is touched. Quite the troublesome ability. I can't let him touch me. I need to put some distance between us. Shisui shunshine to the other side of the battlefield and unleashed a barrage of shuriken towards them. They jumped out of the way and prepared for another assault. Torun slowly began to remove his jacket and later his shirt until he was topless. The poisonous insect spread to completely cover his entire body. Damn, so now I can't even touch him. I'll have to rely on my ninjutsu and genjutsu now. Fu was the first to rush at Shisui. He made a peculiar hand sign that was used by all of the Yamanaka, Shintenshin no Jutsu. Fu quickly took over Shisui's mind but was quickly forced out with the help of the Sharingan. However, it was enough time for Torun to get close and grab his left arm. Shisui quickly pulled away, but the damage had already been done. Arg. Damn it, he infected me with those damn insects. I have no other choice. Shisui quickly unsheathed his tanto. He concentrated Kaden chakra into it and brought it down on his left arm, severing it just below the elbow. I need to finish this quickly. I've already spent enough time with these two. The one-armed Uchiha quickly put the tanto in his mouth and grabbed a handful of shuriken and threw them at Fu while making a few one-handed seals. Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Justu. Fu was able to dodge the majority of them but was hit by a few. He winced, and as he opened his eyes back up was met with a pair of Sharingan, Genjutsu, sleep. Fu slowly lost consciousness before he fell to his knees and his head was severed by Shisui's tanto. Fu. He heard Torun yell. As soon as Fu's head hit the ground, Torun rushed towards Shisui and threw a barrage of punches and kicks out of rage. Shisui was forced to dodge them all, not wanting to risk being infected by the poisonous insects again. The Sharingan uses finally found an opening after ducked under one of Torun's punches and drove his fire-encased tanto into his heart. He overloaded the tanto with Kaden chakra and burned a hole right through where Torun's heart used to be. Shisui's hand and arm was completely burned from the use of Kaden chakra, but he pushed through it, knowing that he still had one fight left in him. He turned around and was greeted with the sight of Danzo. The bandages on his face were gone, revealing a pure white eye, a sign of blindness from the use of Izanagi. He had tossed away his large black robe and was left shirtless so his right arm could clearly be seen. It was a sickly gray color with what looked to be a face on the shoulder. Is that a face? What the hell is up with his arm? So it has come down for me to actually fight. You are indeed strong, Uchiha Shisui, but you shall meet your end by my hand just as so many others have. Shisui reached into his weapons pouch and pulled out 3 kunai with exploding tags attached. Before Danzo could even move, Shisui enhanced the kunai with futon chakra and threw them through the air at a piercing speed. Danzo couldn't get out of the way, so he just put his hands in a singular seal, Mokuten, Mokujoheiki. Danzo created dome-shaped wooden wall made from tree roots to protect him from the blast. TCH. He can even use the Mokuten. What the hell is going on? It must somehow be connected to that arm and face. I have to close the distance. I can't let him use any more Mokuten jutsu. Shisui rushed and unharmed Danzo and engaged him with taijutsu. The Sharingan was able to predict Danzo's movements perfectly and he managed to avoid a majority of them, but his body couldn't keep up with that speed for long and was eventually overwhelmed and launched into a tree with a punch to the chest from Danzo. Danzo rushed Shisui once again, but this time he had to avoid a series of small fireballs coming from one of the tree branches. He quickly wove a few hand seals, futon, Shinkaha, a highly compressed blade of wind escaped Danzo's mouth and cut the tree down, along with several others in the area. Shisui shunshined back to the ground panting, about 30 feet behind Danzo, before the trees could collapse onto each other. Damn it, I'm tiring out. I need to finish him off soon. If I can't change the fate of the Uchiha clan, then I'll at least do Konoha the service of killing this bastard. Danzo saw the exhausted form of Shisui over his shoulder. I suppose I'll finish this right now. Danzo finished his hand seals and inhaled a deep breath of air. Futon, Shinku Taegyoku. Danzo then released a large, crushing sphere of wind chakra meant to completely crush Shisui, but when the dust cleared, Danzo couldn't believe his eyes. In front of him stood a completely battered Shisui with his Mangekyo Sharingan active within a large red skeletal figure. A second later, muscle and tissue began to wrap around the skeletal figure and then its chakra began to flare until it was completely clad in armor. Danzo was about to summon Baku, but before he could even flinch he was pierced with a large orange sword of ethereal energy. This is the third and final power of the Mangekyo Sharingan, the Susanoo. This is my last resort, my perfect defense, Danzo. Nothing can penetrate it. To think that I'd actually be forced to use it. You're finished, Danzo. That blade stabbing you through the stomach is the sword of Tatsuka. It is an ethereal weapon, an enchanted blade that seals anyone it pierces into the world of drunken dreams for all eternity, never to see the light of day again. Goodbye, Shimura Danzo. With that, Danzo was slowly absorbed into the blade and sealed into the sake bottle from which the blade came from. Shisui deactivated his Mangekyo Sharingan in his left eye back into his normal Sharingan. He clutched his right eye in pain. Damn. I was just a second too late in activating my Susanoo. One of the stray wind blades from his last jutsu managed to damage my eye. I was lucky to still be able to use the Susanoo after that. Well, it's finally over. From how dark it is, I'd say that it's around 6 o'clock. I was too late, damn it, Danzo. It was then that Shisui started coughing up a large amount of blood. So I was right. He must have collapsed one of my lungs with that chakra-enhanced punch that sent me flying into the tree. That must have been why I could only perform low-level Kaden jutsus. I can already feel my other lung being filled with blood. I assume I won't be able to breathe anymore within the hour. His hand then went up to his eye as he